So please take place. We can start. Mr. Vardakastanis, President Vardakastanis, who is hosting us, has the floor, please. Thank you.
Dear Minister, dear guests, good morning to all of you from Athens. A very, very warm welcome on behalf of our committee to all of you from the House of Organized Civil Society. Due to other unforeseen commitments, I cannot be with you in person, unfortunately, to take part at your annual meeting today. And also to take part in the very important discussions you are going to have. I would like also to congratulate the new president, Mr. Roussos, on his election. You are a very regular guest at the ESC, and you are always, as you know, very welcome, because we fully support your principal aim, which is to improve the economic and social conditions in European island regions. We know that you strive daily to help these regions to cope with the physical difficulties and barriers that they face just because they are islands. As you know, we do our best to promote your work and also to keep the island agenda at the top of the European priorities. One of the priorities of the ECO section and the ESC as a whole is reducing the gap between the most disadvantaged regions whose development is lagging behind, particularly islands and the other regions, outermost regions, etc. In addition to the opinions that we have adopted over the years, in July 2024, were adopted by a very huge majority a very important resolution entitled "No One Should Be Left Behind" for an inclusive and participatory cohesion policy in support of social, economic, and territorial cohesion. In this resolution, we stress, we underline that it is very essential to create new kinds of economic prospects for the EU's less developed, peripheral, sparsely populated and rural areas, island areas, island regions, and outermost regions. Therefore, in the European Economic and Social Committee, you know you have a very strong ally. And also, from myself, as an islander coming from Zakynthos, you will always have a very strong ally. I wish you fruitful work today, and I will be with you again later on when I will have another opportunity to share with you some ideas and some parts of our work in this committee on islands. Thank you very much and very welcome again.
Thank you very much, President Vardakastanis. You were always with us and you are supporting us, and thank you for all your efforts. Now, the floor to the President, the new President of INSULEUR, Mr. Ioannis.
Με την ιδιότητα
Thank you. Here I am in my capacity as the new president, and it's my great pleasure to invite you to the work we're doing today. We're going to look at how EU cohesion policy can help islands to face up to the challenge of climate change. Now, before we begin, I would like to say that we are very, very happy to say that our friends in the Economic Social Committee and our friends in ECHO, Ioannis, Vardakastanis, thank you very much indeed for welcoming us here to this event. Now, we've had advice from you, and this has been very helpful in thinking about how we can meet citizens' needs. It's been exceptional help, and we'd like to thank Stefano Vico as well for all your work, and Manoli Kutulaki, who is with us today, who has always supported our efforts. We would like to thank you very warmly, President Fito, for the initiatives that you have taken in supporting cohesion policy 2021 to 2027, and also supporting cohesion policy linked to the Commission communication. Now, islands face a particular challenge in terms of cohesion and drawing up a strategy which suits our own areas, and this is the first time that the European Commission has made such a specific communication about island policy. And we are there working in INSULEUR, and this is the first time this has happened since 2000 when we first started work, and this is an historic moment for us. So we hope that in working together we'll be able to develop a comprehensive strategy which will ensure that we can have sustainable development and promote the well-being of island areas. Islands are in the front line of climate change, and we've got the issue affecting the sea, environmental issues altogether, which is stretching the capabilities of our ecosystem. There's the issue of isolation, dependence on tourism, and also problems with transport and also limited funds. All these things increase need and emergency, the urgency of the needs that we are feeling. So in spite of the challenges islands faced, islands are not necessarily properly represented in policy. That's something we want to change. I think the time has come for us to ensure that the EU's cohesion policy is something which meets our needs, island needs, and that it has the right tools in place so as to deal with the specificities that we have on islands so that we can remain sustainable. Now, we're going to be having a discussion today, and we're going to be looking at how cohesion policy can change and be adapted so that it can meet our needs and the specificities that we have on islands. We'll be looking at various topics. We'll be looking at how we can make the best use of funds which are provided by the EU in order to deal with the environmental challenges we face. We'll be look at climate change and how we can adapt to that. We're going to looking at the role of digital tools in increasing resilience. We're going to be looking at transition, and we're also going to be looking at the most effective ways that we can use funding from the EU to promote the resilience and sustainability of our islands. So this workshop here isn't just a question of acknowledging challenges. We need to meet the challenges, and we need to ensure that our islands have the funding they need and the policy in place which will allow for a sustainable future. And I'd like to encourage all of you, experts, everybody here working with policy, all other interested parties, to play an active role in the discussion today, because we want to hear your opinions, your views. That's going to be very useful in contributing the policies that we are going to be coming up with to help islands to face up to climate change. I think if we work together, we can be sure that nobody will be left behind. So thank you very much indeed for taking part in this workshop, and I hope that we're going to have a very fruitful dialogue.
Thank you, President Roussos. It's a great honor to have today with us the Vice Minister of Maritime Policy and Insular Policy, Mr. Stefanos Gikas, who is also an insular coming from Corfu. It's a really great honor for us. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to speak in Greek, so allow me.
Chairman, Mr. Vardakastanis, dear new President of INSULEUR, Mr. Roussos, we'd like to wish you every success in your new role here. And I'm quite sure that we can make very good use of your experience in trying to achieve our common goals. The Greek government attributes an enormous amount of importance to island issues because we recognise these as a separate and very important area of public policy. We have a law in place to recognise that. This is a framework law which is called the National Strategy for the Policy of Islands. We got this law approved 4 years ago, and as a result of that, we now have a specific framework within which we can work, and as part of that, we have adopted a comprehensive set of activities as part of our policy for islands, and we've got financial tools so that we can do construction work, for example, port construction works. We've got work in place to deal with drought and water supply issues, housing, all these things. At the same time, through the General Secretariat of our Maritime Policy Unit, and it is my great pleasure to introduce Mr. 𝐀𝐠𝐞𝐧𝐝𝐚, whom I'm sure you all know. Anyway, we have played a very important role. We've set up cooperation with European and international bodies so as to look at island issues. For example, we've got cooperation with INSULEUR. That is something which strengthens the work which is already underway so that we can put forward the importance of, or we can promote the importance of islands as part of overall strategy. Now, the General Secretariat has a comprehensive plan to promote initiatives such as the Island Barometer, and that was the first systematic tool working to promote SMEs in Ireland. Secondly, we have worked on the national strategy, which along with the Greek Development Bank is currently working on a special island programme for island business and entrepreneurship. We also have a specific policy in place for mobility and transport, and we have the right experts working on this, particularly working on sea transport, maritime transport. Ladies and gentlemen, members of INSULEUR and also the representatives of island communities, yesterday the European Commission gave a communication, or was consulting us about cohesion policy and future policies, and of course this is something that Mr. Rousas has talked about. This is a very important initiative indeed. The Vice President of the European Commission, Rafael Fito, and the Commissioner responsible visited Athens a couple of months ago, and at that time we had a discussion about the various needs, and we said that we needed to have a central hub for islands so that this could be recognised as a separate category for funding. Now, in cooperation with the European Commission, the OSA, we are working on our first study so as to tackle some of the issues within the EU affecting islands, and we are going to be making a significant contribution to the European dialogue as it opens up now. The Greek government has worked very intensively over these years, and in our ministry, particularly through the Island Policy Ministry, we have been working very methodically on these issues and increasing cooperation so that we can ensure that finally the EU recognises the need for a new strategy for islands within the EU. Now, going back to the Lisbon Treaty, and as part of cohesion policy, we need to ensure that we have the option of planning in an active way and funding island needs as part of the structural fund work carried out by the EU. I think the time has come now within the EU for us to look at the potential implementation of island projects, and we need to set up the right mechanisms so that we can have better legislation brought in, better financing brought in, and better understanding and knowledge about our islands. And that is, if you like, the triptych that we need. That's what we need in administering the islands' needs in our own countries. Now, we've talked about a route change in investment. We need this investment so that the EU economy can remain competitiveness and keep its competitive advantages. Now, island economies are a main important pillar of EU development. They've got beautiful seas, they've got a maritime economy, and they can make a significant contribution. Now, we, as Europeans and islanders, need to ensure that the EU does this. They need to do more. We need to find a way of ensuring that we can work effectively to promote social and economic cohesion, something which will suit our islands. That's why today we are all here, along with INSULEUR, the CPMR and the network, and the representatives of the cohesion funds and all these bodies working together so that we can make an active contribution to drawing up policy and making new decisions which will recognise that being an island is something which means that you need to be at the heart of planning in the EU. We need to have specific policies in place. We need to have the right financing in place. We need to have a strengthened institutional framework. With that, we will be able to work towards a sustainable future for our islands. All of us, all together, I mean that, all of us working together can achieve this goal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister, for this very, very supportive for Ireland speech. We could have better than that, I think. Now, let's start with, let's say, the second panel. In fact, May I ask Irene to take the floor with... no, you stay there, maybe, President. They will stay at the side of the table. I will call her now. But before, take place, and we call Judith, Professor Judith 𝐀𝐠𝐞𝐧𝐝𝐚.
Hi, good morning. I'm going to share my screen. Can you hear me correctly?
Yes. Could you
Okay.
please introduce yourself, Judith?
Okay, of course. I'm a professor recently a professor in the University of La Laguna in the Canary Island, and I'm working with a research group called 𝐀𝐠𝐞𝐧𝐝𝐚, specialized in analyze the future impact of climate change in different aspects, mainly in the small islands. So the work I will present is related to that, to one of our main industry, that is the tourism, specifically in the Canary Island. So thank you for having me presenting this work entitled Projected Impact of Climate Change on Tourism in the Canary Island, that we presented we published in 2022 in the Regional Environmental Change Journal, to analyze the future change of some weather variables like temperature, humidity, cloud cover, wind, and precipitation that will have an impact in the comfortability of the tourists in the future. Tourism is fundamental to the economy of the Canary Island. 40% of our employment depends on the tourism, and it contributes 30% of the gross domestic product. In 2024, the population of the Canary Island was 2.2 million people, and we received an influx of 18 million tourists. All these data are from the statistic agency of the Canary Island. Contrary to other destinations, the seasonal fluctuation in our tourist demand are very small. As you can see in the green line, the total number of tourists is really stable throughout the year. The result of surveys performed by the government of the Canary Island show that almost 90% of our visiting tourists' main reason for choosing the islands are the climate or the sun. The main countries of origin of our tourists arriving the Canary Island are United Kingdom with a 32% and 16, followed by Germany with a 16%. The tourism industry is highly vulnerable to climate change, and it has been identified as a major challenge for tourists in the 21st century. Climatically, the Canary Islands are influenced by the Azores anticyclone you have on the left, and the cold Canary Current that you have represented on the right figure, and it results in an unstable climate throughout the year, with an annual temperature in the coastal areas in the Canary Island where the tourist infrastructure is located between 20 to 21 degrees Celsius, with an annual variability of only 6-7 degrees Celsius. The problem or the challenge to do future projections in the Canary Islands is the complex topography that determines the climate. Within a distance of only 20 kilometers can be reached altitudes of 3 kilometers, as in the north of Tenerife Island, but also in all the western highest islands. What methodologies has been employed to project the future impact of climate change on the tourism sector? We work with the regional climate model that incorporate different modules to have the projection, like hydrology, vegetation, topography, And we work with a spatial resolution of 3 by 3 kilometers. For doing that, we work with the 960 cores in high performance computing to do all this high resolution. And our group was working during 1 year doing all this simulation, considering the preprocessing too. To run this future simulation, we work with the as initial and boundary condition with 3 general circulation models you have in this table. But the problem with this global model is the coarse spatial resolution. 2 degrees in our latitude is approximately 200 kilometers. And as you can see in this figure, is not enough to solve the high resolution we need to solve the islands. To do the future projections, we work with 2 scenarios, 2 representative concentration pathways, the scenario of the emissions of greenhouse gases. We work with this intermediate efforts in mitigation scenario, RCP 4.5, and the business as usual scenario of emissions, RCP 8.5. We work with 3 periods of 30 years, the historical period starting in 1980, and this historical period was to compare with the future and also to be sure that our model reproduce correctly our climate. 2 future periods starting in 2030 at the middle of the century and at the end of the century starting in 2070. The most widely used climate index are the Mt Climate Index, and the other one is Holiday Climate Index that can be segmented by destination type, like urban and beach. These indices work with these weather variables, temperature and relative humidity that compose the thermal comfort, the cloud cover, precipitation, and wind speed. Depending on the index, for example, this index related to the beach has a big weight in cloud cover. It's not good for going to the beach, but a less weight in temperature and relative humidity. But on the contrary, the urban index, the U index, has more weight in temperature and relative humidity. These weather variables are weight and rating depending on ranges, and as an example, a thermal climate index rating of 100, the maximum level, is achieved under the following ideal conditions: a temperature between 20 to 27 degrees Celsius, an average monthly radiation of more than 10 hours per day, wind speed below 3 kilometers per hour, and average monthly precipitation below 15 millimeters per month. These conditions are good for tourists, but not for other sectors like agriculture, obviously. These indices have demonstrated predictive power for overnight stays in diverse destinations as Mediterranean or North America, and for this reason we used this index to project in the Canary Islands. In our study, we utilized the following indices. TCI 80, for example, is TCI above 80 rate. That means excellent or ideal days for tourism. First thing we did was to evaluate the model performance. For doing that, we selected 3 different observation stations in the island of Tenerife, one located in the coast, the other in the middle of the island, and the last one above 2 kilometers of altitude. And as we can see here in this result, the red line are the observations. The seasonal variation is correctly reproduced by the model. And also we can see that the beach index has a strong reduction with the height. In the coast, we have more than 25 ideal days for tourism and during the summer month, but on the contrary, it is reduced with the height to 20 or almost 10, 15 days ideal for tourism in the highest part of the island. This is the index, the excellent or ideal day per month in the recent past, in the present. We have in the coastal part of the island during the summer month almost 30 days per month, ideal for tourism, but it is reduced in the shoulder seasons. Only the coast have ideal days for tourism, and obviously is more reduced during the winter month, and in the highest part of the island to only 10 days ideal for tourism during this month and highest part. These are the projected changes until the end of the century, and in the worst case scenario during the winter and during the summer month. In the winter, we project an improvement on the ideal conditions for tourism until between 10 and 20 days ideal for tourism in the island. But during the summer month, we will expect a reduction of these ideal days, especially in the southern part of the island and in the east. That is where the tourist infrastructure is currently located. With respect to the urban index, we will expect even more worsening of the ideal condition for tourism in the same areas, in the southern part of the island, with a big reduction of these ideal days. We also analyze some specific areas where the tourist infrastructure is located, and you have represented these points in red in the map. And in the solid line, you have the present, recent past condition, the present conditions, and in the shaded lines, you have the projected, the projections into the future. For example, in all the location, we see an improvement during the conditions during the winter month, but a reduce of the ideal condition in the summer month. This reduction in the, for example, in this location in Maspalomas in Gran Canaria Island, we will see a reduction from almost 25 ideal days for tourists during the August to more or less roughly 10 days per month. But even in the not worst case scenario, in the intermediate scenario, this worsening is more or less 5 to 10 days per month. To what can these anticipated changes be ascribed? To analyze that, we work with finite differences to analyze these possible contributors, the thermal comfort, cloud cover, precipitation, and wind. And as we can see in these figures, both the improvement of ideal conditions during the winter month as the worsening of the condition during the winter month, the most important contributor is the thermal comfort. So the increase in temperature and the humidity will change the climate conditions into the future. With these same future projections, we have also analyzed other parameters that are important because the tourism is a high demand of water. So we analyze the drought and aridity projections working with this index, the aridity change index, that is a fractional change of potential evapotranspiration to precipitation in the future related to the recent past. And we will expect wetter condition when the index is below 1 and drier condition when the index is above 1. And as you can see in this figure, in all the different heights in the islands, we will see future drier conditions into the future in the intermediate emission scenario, but in the worst case scenario, this aridity change index will increase until 6. That means that the change in evaporation is 6 times more than the change in precipitation that will drive big aridity conditions in the island. This is important not only because the tourist is a highly demanded of water, but also in the other sectors like agriculture, but also in the landscapes of the islands. What are the subsequent steps we are working with in our research group is to project these indices into the future, but also in other archipelagos like Azores and Madeira Islands from Portugal, Canary Islands again in Spain, and Cape Verde. For doing that, we need high resources in computing, storage, and communication to achieve the necessary 3 by 3 kilometers of spatial resolution. We have an agreement with a supercomputing center in the island, and we will work with the more than 6 million cells, are a really big number, and a storage of 450 terabytes, only the outputs of these projections. And we need to have a management of all this infrastructure and storage. As conclusions, the Canary Islands are a unique, currently in coastal, are a unique laboratory for analyzing the impact of climate change on tourism. Their economy is highly dependent on the sector and their complex terrain. The United Kingdom and Germany will see improved weather conditions for tourism during the summer months in the future. This is an uncertainty that we have not considered in our study, but it will be important to calculate the projections in our visitors in the future. The main factor influencing future variations in the indices is thermal comfort, with a weight between 62 and 92% over other factors like cloud cover, precipitation, and wind. Currently, in coastal areas, the number of excellent days for tourism exceeds 20, reaching 30 during the summer months and decreasing at altitude. Tourist destinations will need to adapt to climate change. Southeastern part of the island, where the hotel infrastructure is currently located, will see worsening tourist rates in summer and autumn. This decline in optimal days will be accentuated at the end of the century and in the worst-case emission scenario. Not relying exclusively on summer could be an advantage considering future changes. The capacity for resilience within the tourism sector and the economy at large must be enhanced, taking into account additional impacts of climate change, including sea level rise and increase in extreme and weather events. Thank you to our, this project has been financed by the European Union Interreg program, and we have been supported also by the government of the Canary Islands. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor 𝐀𝐠𝐞𝐧𝐝𝐚, for this really very interesting work. I think that this methodology can be extended not only to the archipelagos of the region, but also to all islands of the Mediterranean also. So Insular can, let's say, contribute to that if there is an agreement with the university in order to see how we can collaborate in order to, let's say, include all our islands in this methodology. Second, this work will be very interesting for the consultation process of the European Strategy for Islands that was announced 2 days ago by Commissioner De Fito. And third, it will be very interesting also for our friend Lefteris 𝐀𝐠𝐞𝐧𝐝𝐚, who is a lover of Canary Islands, and he is always come in Canary once per year, I think. Lefteris will be in the panel. Please take place in order to start the second panel. Irene. Claire, please.
Thank you indeed, Professor Carillo, for your insightful presentation. This research has provided a critical foundation, I believe, for the discussion that we will now have. So good morning, I'm 𝐀𝐠𝐚. I'll be moderating this session on Islander Voices, a space which is dedicated to hearing directly from those who experience the challenges of insularity firsthand. We heard about how climate change poses disproportionate risks to island economies, affecting sectors like tourism. We will also hear how they affect maritime transport and energy. But we also know, and it has been highlighted by Professor Carillo, that islands are not just vulnerable, they are leaders in adaptation and resilience. And this is why cohesion policy is so crucial. It must evolve to provide targeted, accessible and flexible support that reflects the realities of island life. So today we will be hearing from island representatives who bring diverse perspectives on how EU policies can better serve their communities. And we will start by Ms. Claire Haley, representing the CPMR Islands Commission with a strategic regional perspective on insular policy. Where's he?
I'm here.
Oh.
Hello, good morning to all of you. I'm Claire Haley. I'm a policy and project officer at the CPMR Islands Commission. Hello. First of all, I would like to say congratulations to Mr. Roussos for his election as president of INSULEUR, and we look forward to cooperating with you. I would like also to thank INSULEUR EESC and the European Economic and Social Committee for hosting this event and for inviting us to contribute to this important debate today on cohesion policy and climate change in islands. Indeed, islands are at the forefront of climate change and face multiple risks. In the recent years, they have been particularly affected by climate change and extreme weather events such as wildfires, droughts, floodings, cyclones, all dramatically affecting people's lives, destroying their homes and their livelihoods, and damaging islands' biodiversity and infrastructures. In a world with an average of 1.1 degree more compared to the 19th century level, we already witness this cruel reality, and we know it will only get more intense and more frequent as the global temperatures continue to rise. In the 2021 EU adaptation strategy to climate change, the European Commission already acknowledged that even in the best case scenario, substantial adaptation efforts would still be required, switching the approach from mitigation to adaptation to climate change. And so at EU level, numerous voices, including the CPMR, advocate to support urgent actions towards the adaptation to climate change and its unavoidable impacts, taking into account the specific realities and challenges of island regions. So indeed, insular territories are particularly vulnerable to climate change, facing a triple vulnerability. First of all, islands faced an environmental vulnerability. They count on an exceptional biodiversity. In fact, it is estimated that outermost regions and overseas countries and territories hold for more than 80% of the biodiversity in Europe. But this rich biodiversity is also quite fragile. In addition to the risk I mentioned in the introduction, being coastal by nature, islands are also particularly vulnerable to the rise of sea level, the submersion risk, and the coastal erosion. And climate change produces a vicious cycle by destroying natural habitats which can no longer provide their ecosystemic services. So, for instance, a burnt forest can no longer act as a temperature regulator nor prevent floodings from happening. And today we know that in some islands, the ecosystems such as mangroves and wetlands are at particular risk of collapsing. Secondly, the islands face an economic vulnerability. This was evidenced by the European Climate Risk Assessment. Islands' economies are particularly sensitive to crisis, as they often lack diversification, with an important prevalence of agriculture, fisheries and tourism, all very sensitive sectors to the effect of climate change. In addition, the destruction of infrastructures following extreme weather events represents a significant cost to support, which also impacts the economic performance of these already less developed regions. And at EU level, these costs have already increased by 22% between 2021 and 2023, showing an acceleration of the effects of climate change. And third, islands often count with social vulnerability, as usually islands and outermost regions count on higher poverty rates than on the mainland. And for instance, in Mayotte, the complete destructions of the buildings that were not built in concrete following the cyclone Chido affected in particular the most vulnerable, their livelihoods, and impacted the social development of the island on the long term. So how can adaptation strategies to climate change integrate the specificities of islands? First of all, it is crucial to effectively identify and assess the level of risk. And this once again raises the issue of gathering data for islands in the absence of a satisfactory and commonly agreed definition. Currently, the risk assessment is made at member states level, but the scale cannot capture the complex reality of regional ecosystems. And so the CPMR has been advocating for a long time already for this to be done at not two levels at least, while encouraging a place-based approach to take into account islands' challenges and risk. In addition, transparent indicators of territorial vulnerability and risk assessment are needed, and to this regard, the European Climate Risk Assessment represents a useful tool which also integrates a geographical perspective with a specific section on outermost regions, so perhaps in the future it will do so also for islands in general. Secondly, we believe it is paramount to ensure a place-based and multi-level governance approach in the definition and implementation of the national adaptation strategies and plans. These plans should fully integrate the just resilience principle to ensure that no one is left behind, and they should also integrate the Build Back Better principle to prevent new damages from happening. And finally, methods that the climate resilience dialogue should be fostered to reduce the gap between what is lost and what is insured. And we will be following with great attention the newly announced new European Climate Adaptation Plan, which will be presented by the European Commission in 2026. Now, how can cohesion policy contribute to climate change adaptation? So in the framework of the EU adaptation strategy and policy adopted in 2021, the cohesion policy plays a key role through instruments such as ERDF, Cohesion Fund, and the Just Transition Fund, among others. However, despite an overall increase in the cohesion policy support to climate adaptation with comparison to the previous programming period, this still only represents only 3% of the total cohesion policy budget. So given the magnitude of the challenge, this should be improved, and the CPMR Islands Commission urges European institutions and national governments to continue to further support the adaptation of insular territories to climate risk. So the CPMR calls for increasing the flexibility in the eligibility rules and introducing fast-track and simplified procedures for the selection of projects which are aligned with climate priorities. Of course, to this regard, we also welcome the Restore package as a positive step, which was notably carried by Vice President Yunus Omarjee, and the flexibility it provides to the regional authorities to access ERDF and cohesion funds for disaster reconstruction. However, the first feedbacks we have received on its implementation stress that further flexibility could still be provided in order to access the funds in a more timely manner, so to be able to respond with the rapidity that emergencies require. In addition, we have mentioned it earlier today, the CPMR, and particularly its Islands Commission, welcome with great attention the recently announced consultation on the development of a strategy for islands and an updated strategy for outermost regions. And so, indeed, this is a historical moment and an important response to long-lasting Islands Commission demand. And the CPMR stands ready to offer its full cooperation to the European Commission to help identify the most effective solutions for these territories, including regarding climate change adaptation. Finally, in relation to climate change, we also acknowledge the potential of cooperation and the key role of Interreg for testing innovative approaches and foster cumulative knowledge. And we recommend, therefore, that a new policy objective is introduced specifically on adaptation under the future generation of Interreg programs. And since climate change knows no border, we advocate for increasing cooperation with third countries, particularly in the case of islands, which are often located at the borders of the EU. So, to conclude, in the last few weeks, we know the global order has dramatically shifted, which has marked a turning point in EU priorities, with particular attention to defence policies. This shift is also reflected in the midterm review on cohesion policy. However, the increasing importance of defence considerations should not overshadow the challenges regarding regional development, in particular for the most vulnerable territories as islands, and the challenges related to climate change. As major powers are withdrawing from the Paris Agreement, reducing carbon emissions and adapting to climate change should remain a major priority to ensure a sustainable future for islands. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Claire, as always, for your valuable insights on how the CPMR Island Commission, who's always present at our workshops, how it's working to ensure that insular regions receive stronger support, and through EU cohesion policy specifically. Your points on the need for long-term strategic funding, more flexibility, better governance for islands are crucial. And we will discuss about them with the other speakers. And I'm now calling Mr. 𝐀𝐠𝐞𝐧𝐝𝐚 to hear about the unique challenges that small islands and maritime professionals face.
Good morning. I'm here, President of Hellenic Small Islands Club. The first thing I'd like to do is to thank Ioannis Vardakastanis for the fact that you have made such a positive contribution to our work and working with small islands. Now, 20 years ago, Ioannis, when he first started, he was the president of the AMEA in Greece. And Yorgos Hassonitis at the time was in the permanent representation in Brussels. And Mr. Stavropoulos was somebody who just started in the Commission. And we had the Vice President in there as well. And Tassos Oliferis and I used to meet together and talk about islands and all the issues related now. But of course, Yanos Roussos change also came in so that we had a full complement of people. And here we are working with the representative from the Commission as well. And we've had this communication now. We've never heard this before, but now we have this communication on islands, something which is a first for us. Now, there are two presentations here. Now, we've talked already about some of the problems faced by small islands, but I think We've got Panayiotis Finikis here. He is a captain, has worked in the IMO on some of their own issues, but we've got other islands as well, and we can see the sort of issues that we face too. And we are talking in particular about the problems of maritime transport. We saw this yesterday. We saw how important this is. So, shipping challenges with the new environmental regulations as imposed by the EU. I think these are very difficult regulations, and they are creating problems with compliance, with fuel availability and transition, new technological limitations and innovation costs. I'm going to give you this speech later. Actually, I shall send it to you in printed version, in printed copy if you want. It's very interesting because I'm going to be running through these headings here, and you can have a look at them in more detail if you like later. So here we are looking at the challenges in shipping transportation. Well, on the one hand, we've got the economic impact on shipping companies, we've got the global competitiveness and trade impact, so we've got implementation and monitoring challenges, we've got impact on developing countries, transition to green technologies. How is it going to help us to move to green technologies? And of course, how this is going to impact island economies and society. So who is going to be there implementing these new rules? Now, nobody, I think, doubts that we're going to improve public health, we're going to improve environmental protection, economic transformation and job creation. Now I'm going to move on a little bit and talk about some of the basic issues relating to islands and transport. So we are looking, of course, that the costs of transport, that's going to be increasing. This is going to have an effect on consumers. We're going to have disruption to a certain extent in terms of the supply chain disruption, that is. The speaker is speaking very, very quickly. So I was talking about supply chain disruptions and delays, but the same applies to increased investment in sustainability, because that's going to actually create problems for global trade. But anyway, you might not think that that's of such interest, but if you take all this together, of course, then it can, all in all, lead to social unrest and problems with supply. We are going to have improvement, I think, in terms of climate change. We're going to have climate change mitigation, and we'll also have seen greater awareness amongst consumers and also commitment about climate issues and the environment. And I'll just finish off by saying once again that I will be sending you this presentation. It's about 20 pages long, so I'll send you the whole thing. But so we've got these new rules, new regulations in shipments, which are crucial so as to reduce the industry's environmental impact, and I think it's a very good thing we have them, but we're going to there's going to be an impact on societies on islands, and we need to deal with those challenges. In transport is one thing. We need to, as soon as possible, assess how this is going to affect island communities, particularly small islands. I'll just give you an example of the sort of thing I mean. We don't need to bring food over from China. We need to work on making sure that we develop our own sources and develop the food sector on islands. Now, there are other examples of the sort of areas which will be effective whenever EU ships change their trade routes, so they've got goods which might have come in before from Asia reaching the Mediterranean, but they won't necessarily be doing that anymore. They'll be coming from other places, and there are going to be other routes to Europe. So I think what Europe needs to do is to become more resilient to these new routes. And this was a captain, a quote, who is one of the best known ones in the world. I keep looking at this photograph in front of me, and I'd just like to show you this, and now move on to the second presentation.
Εκτός από τους μεταφραστές που τους άγχωσα.
No, I hope that that's all right. I know it was a bit difficult for the interpreter, says the speaker, but I hope it's been all right for everybody else. So now we move on to the next presentation. What's happening on small islands and how are we viewed by third parties? Now, I won't repeat what we've already heard. I think we all know each other and some of us are actually friends here. So I'm going to move on now to talk about some of the problems that we have seen in the past and look at some of the examples we've talked about together. Some of them, of course, are related to climate. So looking at the impact of climate change on islands first. Now, there are a couple of things that I remember, particularly from our discussion. A couple of words. One is resilience and the other is adaptations. We've already got a compass now, which has been produced to guide us through the use of financial tools. But this compass contains certain rules. But if I read these rules and I try and work out what it's actually aimed at, I can't really see the difference between how it would apply to a big city or an island. I wouldn't be able to work out what was what, because all the rules are the same. And here, what I want to tell you is that I wrote this about a fortnight ago, this set of slides. I haven't changed it, actually. We've had, of course, communication in the meantime. But the fact is that a lot of things that are in here actually were reflected in what the Commissioner said yesterday. Now, there are more than 50 programs in place where there can be funding provided, and these have all been put in order, and these are all being supported by the EU. But if you try and work out where you would find an island in here, there might be 2 or 3 different ones. There are some categories where it's very clearly a case for islands to belong, but it could be different types of financing which apply to the island. Some of them are structural in nature, but it's very difficult to find your way through this because of the issues that islands face in particular. One of the main ones, of course, is cohesion. Cohesion, of course, is vital here, the cohesion funds. Now, I'd just like to give a comparison now of a couple of EU programs. Horizon 2020, where we've had some of the most successful units, some working on small islands, and then a new program, which is just starting off in our own country. It's called Greco Islands, and this is a program which works on eco-activities on islands, and we've got 155 billion euros being allocated to this. And if you try and look at the situation that small islands face vis-à-vis large cities, then you will see that you have to assess certain criteria. And we have certain advantages, in fact. We've got the administration in place, we know the situation, we've got the scientific knowledge, we've got the financing tools in place. But what haven't we got? Well, we haven't got the right networking. I think you all know that. We're all faced with the fact that we don't have the scientific knowledge that we need. Very often, you get a picture of the situation in small islands, and very often they're out of step with the rest of the country. Tilo and Castirosa, for example, have got certain networks with roads, and Milo and some of the Italian islands are also linked up with other areas, and they are working together with areas on the mainland. But we're also missing something else. It's not just that scientific knowledge which is missing. I told you that the General Secretary is the only one who has actually worked on the first important issue here, which is indicators, which we don't have. We don't have indicators. Now, looking at this here, if you look at the web page of the Greek ministry, you'll see this. It talks about Greco Island, and this is from the Foreign Affairs Ministry, the External Affairs Ministry. It's not to do with the environment, and most of the information here is held by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and it's part of Foreign Affairs policy. They were the ones who put forward the Greco Islands initiative, and here you can see a photograph. This is the island. You can see some of the things which are being done here on the islands. And what this means is that people realise this is possible, that this is how money can be spent. So you've got all these things actually being done. Now, apart from the the indicators, what else is missing? Something else is missing, of course. It's support that's missing. On the one hand, you might have the financing, but you've got to know how to spend that money. You've got the Jaspers problem, which of course provides financing from the EU in the regions. But what does that involve? Well, there are more than very large amounts of money involved. And that combines expertise from the EU and also the European Investment Bank expertise. And that programme has noted that there's a lack of participation by society. And it's fine to go along, look at a piece of work which is being done. You might get an activity, give it a title. You might call it cultural, or you might call it whatever you like, but it doesn't actually have any effect necessarily. Now, the Commissioner for Cohesion is the person who can do more in terms of competitiveness and transport and fishery than anybody else. So cohesion is the key here. We keep coming up against this with this word cohesion. And basically, it's cohesion which is the heart of all of this. Be very useful to get more information about this from our representative from the ministry and what can be done in Greece, and see how we compare with the north of the country. So I was talking before about the Greco Islands. They've now started talking about improving staffing, bring in society, environment and climate, bring all these elements in as well to that programme so that we can move on in our work. So what do we want? Well, first of all, we want indicators. We want institutional processes to be brought in. There is an old study. I don't know how useful that will be now, but there was an old study on this. But we need to find the proper institutionalized structure so that economic policy can work effectively with institution and social policy. It's not by chance that these are linked up in the EU, and it's not by chance that we talk about economic and social policy in the same breath. Thank you very much for listening to me. I won't say very much more. Of course, if you want to say anything, please do. But I think the most successful area of activity in Ireland has been largely due to local initiatives and the free economy, I think. I think the main characteristic of this, and this is what the Mayor of Stila was saying, was we've had the involvement of local authorities and the local community. So that is vital, and that's where you can be most effective. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Mr. 𝐀𝐠𝐞𝐧𝐝𝐚, and please extend our thanks to Captain Finikis as well for highlighting the pressing issues of connectivity, transport dependency, the impacts of climate change, and the problem of indicators that we have dealt about in previous workshops that took place here at the European Economic and Social Committee. Of course, also on maritime activities. Your experiences show how vital it is for EU policies to account for the daily realities of islanders. And on this note, we will move to our next speakers from Sardinia, Mr. Nastasi, Mr. Sata, and Mr. Cabras, who will share their perspectives on environmental policies and Euromed cooperation, among others. I'm going to come and give you the...
Just to manage a little bit the time, because we have also the third panel.
How much do we give them?
I mean, 20 minutes for all.
Or we go there? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Giovanni is starting.
Yeah, but I introduce, I'm Gaetano Nastasi from the board of the Chamber of Cagliari. I introduce, and from today also of INSULEUR, I introduce Mr. Giovanni Sata. He speaks he speaks for the regional government, environmental department, and after Giovanni, we introduce the speech of Emanuele Cabras. He is an advisor of the Chamber of Commerce of Cagliari. The floor is yours, Joe.
Thank you so much for your invitation to speak here. I have to switch in Italian because I do not want to lose some ideas I want to transfer to the audition. So please apologies for this. And can you go with the slide? Okay. Grazie. Allora.
Thank you. So I'll just give you a quick rundown of what was behind our regional climate change adaptation strategy. Now, in Sardinia, we were one of the first actually to adopt such a strategy in Italy in 2019. In 2024, we updated that, and it's very much up to date from a legislative point of view nationally. So let's start here. Obviously, I think we all agree on the Agenda 2030 goals. We can't deny that we all agree that we do need to work to improve our lives and the prospects for well-being, and we need to work together so as to achieve these goals together. There are various aspects, of course, to this. We've heard from previous speakers, and it's the climate, which is the problem here. You've got the CCA and the SD in this report, and they've said very clearly that there are limits now on potential development, and they are as a result of climate change. So we've got various choices that we need to make, and I think in our region, that's what we're trying to work on, looking at the choices available to us, and we hope to be able to continue in the best possible way and to live in the best possible way so that we can achieve the greatest number of goals possible, the objectives for sustainable and social development and environmental well-being. So I think this is rather an old cartoon, but it shows you what's happening now. You can see that you've got the waves coming in from the right, and you also see that there are some smaller waves there, various contingencies that you can have to face. But unfortunately, climate change is something which is there as the biggest wave, and it's an inevitable wave that we are facing. So we're looking in terms of the next 30 to 50 years and working out what we face next. One thing we do know is that this wave is vital in all policies that we are introducing, and this is something that we need to continue to face up to. So we have got now this picture where this surfer is not trying to escape, he's trying to go with the wave, if you see what I mean in this picture. This is a wave which is getting bigger and bigger, and we're having to use more and more of our effort to try and deal with that situation. We've got various scenarios which we have to face, but this is not new, nothing new. So continuing with this metaphor, we see that this surfer is adopting the sort of strategy that I think we should adopt. We should work with it, go with the waves. And there have been lots of studies on the various sectors in Sardinia. One of them would be fires, things like that. But we've seen in our administration that it's simply not possible to ignore this. We can't just have individual strategies in different sectors. We need to have a strategy which is overarching, because the sectors which are affected by climate change are interlinked. And every time you work on one sector, it's going to affect another. And when you look at the environmental impact, for example, you see that that is something which is also having an impact in social and economic terms, and the same applies the other way around. If you think about social and economic policy, you're going to see that that's going to have an effect on other structural areas as well. In 2024, we had the first running-in period, of course, but then we carried out a review in 2024 because we realised that there had been various activities introduced, particularly with the help of the EU, for example, in the regulation on investment, where you had climate change as one of the elements in there. You had the do not significant harm, that was another thing, and all of these things were working to a situation whereby the environment has to be given due attention in whatever policy you're introducing. And these are the areas. Mitigation, that's something we can all work towards. On adaptation, that is an area where individual solutions are not going to have an impact. They're not even possible in some cases. And they're not even going to be the sort of solution which avoid the problem. So there you need to work together collectively. And this is where the public administrations come in. Sometimes it's not public organisation, of course. It could be private initiatives. So this is the general background to what we're doing then. Whenever we introduce strategies, in 2019, we introduced a mainstream element into our policy because we realised that the impact of policy applies across the board, or affects all policies across the board. So whenever you're working on the environment, you have to think about other components as well. Now, this is nothing new. We didn't invent this. Obviously, European documents have already worked on this policy, but this is not something which can be taken for granted either. People do tend to introduce policy which are aimed at working independently of each other. So what are we doing now then? Well, what we are doing is virtually all of us are working on an incremental adaptation, as you might call it. So given the social and economic challenges, we're thinking about what will happen over the next 30 years, and we're trying to protect anything that we can in spite of the changing situation. And if you compare this with what we had 30 years ago, you'll see that there's been a big change. Given the environmental impact, the situation 30 years ago was completely different, and we adopted a completely different approach. But now we've got new technological instruments available to us, and we need to work with that in mind. We need to try and understand exactly what the impact of what we decide now will be in 30 years' time. And we need to do that within our administration and work out what the best possible instruments are to take the best possible account of that 30-year time scale. So you can talk about transformative adaptation of systems, that's true. And I'm sure that in a few years' time, that will certainly be more and more the case, that we take such a transformative approach. But turning now to the studies that I've talked about, well, we see that various tools and methods have come out of those. And all of these studies have pointed to the sort of tools that can help us to provide the right structure. For example, in Sardinia, this would certainly be the case, and allow us to act efficiently. Now I'm just going to focus on these ones here. Everything we've talked about, I think, brings us back, more or less, from what we've heard from everybody, brings us back to the fact that we need to have common language, common terms. We need to talk about exposition, all these things, climate change, climate cycle. These are not necessarily words which are used by everybody across the board, but we need to have a common language, because if we don't have a common language, it's going to be difficult to work together, because there are some terms which people might not understand. So the more we can simplify communication on what we need to do, the better. The easier it will be for us to understand how we can achieve the goals we're pursuing and what individuals can do, or what individual actors can do. But this lays the foundations. If you have a common language, then that means that you can have a common set of tools that you're working on, or a common set of goals that you're working on. So this is now how you might describe our own system for governance in Sardinia. This is the organigram that we have. We've got various parts to this. You've got the European side, of course, but you've got a two-phase approach. Basically, that's what this is about. Our job is to take international, national goals and convert those to local and regional action plans. That's a difficult task because very often when these objectives are out loud and choices are made, and then you try and put them into small-scale policy, it's not very clear exactly what the detail of that should be. They're not explicit, and you do need to do an extra level of work. You need to downscale, if you like, and that's quite a tricky job. However, in practice, we are coming up with ideas, and this gives you an idea of the sort of thing we're doing. These are, for example, the sort of thing you would need for islands as well, because you need to go back to the source, find out what the main objective is, and then take it down and see how this will work in islands. Of course, islands won't necessarily be able to do this work on their own, but thankfully, we are able to work at international and national level, and with our own Commission on Environment, and we can turn to regional structures as well, not just island structures. That's certainly the case in Italy. So in the past, and we hope that we'll be able to do this in the future as well, what we've done is to go through the European Committee of the Regions and try and draw the attention of the European Commission to some of the issues we face. And one of the things that we've studied would be financial instruments. We're looking to the future. I think that if anybody gets left out, of course, things won't work. But we need specific instruments for islands, and it may well be that people do get missed out. But if you look at the way that resources are split up and broken down or allocated, you might say, yes, well, let's have resources for adaptation or technical support, because that's what's missing, because knowledge, know-how transfer is missing. But you may find that you end up with too much focus on one particular aspect. In Sardinia, certainly, we've got a very high level of resources, but within all the resources, if you don't have the right one, it can prove very difficult to actually put structure into the activities which are needed. So it's a question of planning. How do you decide? You can't necessarily take a line of financing and apply it directly. You need to work out how the financing can be adapted to achieve the goals you've set. You might need money for doctors, for example. You might need to train people. You might need school syllabus training. You need to work out how you can think about the future and see where the choices need to be made. Now, in our strategy, you see various options which tell us or give you an indication of where investment needs to be put in. And there will be various sources of financing. It's not necessarily always EU financing, but the approach is the same. You need to integrate choices, and you don't just say this is EU financing, this is national funding, but you need to ensure that you have the right strategic approach in using financing, because administration, for example, might need a certain type of infrastructure, and they might want to protect a certain piece of infrastructure from future irreversible damage, and that would be your strategic goal. Obviously, you need checks and balances. You need to have proper selection criteria as well. The Commission, of course, includes that. And I'll just finish off by talking about one other thing which is needed. We need technical assistance, training and coaching, because what we're seeing in practice is that is very much missing. You can look at the management authorities of the structural funds. You'll see that that is missing. We've really understood that we need people with the right skills working on these projects, and planners and monitorers and management. It's not just the projects themselves; it's the people, and so that you can make sure that the various criteria which have been allowed can be met appropriately, and we can make this work for us over the next 30 years. So that's all. So if anybody wants to ask any questions, that's fine, but I shall be making this document available to you anyway. Thank you.
I will give the floor to you just to say that we are past the time now, so we have to keep it short, really short. Thank you.
Okay. Can you? Okay. Mr. Sata talked about the point of view of the public sector. Now I will try very shortly to show the point of view of the island enterprises, because let me remind you that all our chambers are the voice of the enterprises, especially of the micro and small enterprises that are the most common kind of enterprise. EU policies in favor of island enterprises in facing climate change. We have some milestone. I'm mentioning some of them, maybe not all of them. The most known is the resolution of the Parliament of June 2022, where there are some that was related to the policies, to the cohesion policies addressed to the islands, and there are some points that concern climate change adaptation and mitigation. It is recognized, and this is very important, that the island enterprises are particularly vulnerable to climate change impacts, and that they need support for adaptation. Of course, as you know, the resolution of Parliament are call to the decision making to the European Commission, and so another key point concern the financial and regulatory support, and also again the Parliament asked for promoting the establishment of innovation hubs, a research center to support the islands to implement climate resilient solutions, and so on. A second important milestone that has been mentioned today by our President Borg and by also other speakers is the recent declaration by Commissioner Fittot that mentioned that it will be launched a consultation to develop a dedicated strategy for islands within the framework of the EU cohesion policy. I don't know if we are still in time on having an impact now on the current cohesion policies. Maybe it's more realistic try to influence the post-27 cohesion policy, but this is the time for the islands to make our voice stronger. So, what can be the proposals of the island enterprises? First of all, we need to increase the skills of companies about climate change, about how to adapt to climate change. So we need support for training entrepreneurs and their staff. We need technical assistance in order to support the investment choices of our companies, because now we need entrepreneurs that are aware that each investment choice must consider the future impact of climate change. So, first of all, we need training and technical assistance. Second point, this concerns the new measure of climate change, but this is a critical point for all our enterprise. If any measure will be introduced concerning climate change within the cohesion policies, we must have assurance by the European Commission that bureaucracy will be reduced or at least kept under control, and that administrative simplification will be carried on by any kind of policies concerning climate change. This is the second point. Third point, you know, the insurance for damages caused by extreme climate events has become mandatory in Europe, and it is a measure very costly for our companies. So it is necessary to provide economic support, especially to micro and small enterprises, because these costs are not sustainable for our small companies. Insurance for damages are necessary, okay, especially in some sectors. Agriculture is maybe the most hit sector by climate change. We want to protect our company by insurance for damages, but we ask for a support to face this cost. That is a social cost. Okay, let's clarify this point. Climate change causes social cost. This is the third point. And finally, this point was mentioned by many speakers today. First of all, by the president of Mallorca Chamber. We have to discuss about special state rules for enterprises of islands, and climate change can be one of a domain where special rules can be applied. So these are some of the main points. There are also many other points, maybe, but we believe that our enterprises, and when I mention our enterprises, I'm mentioning all the islands, not only Sardinian islands or Italian islands. We are talking about all the islands enterprises. Thank you very much.
Big thank you to Mr. Anastasi, Mr. Sata, and Mr. Cabras for this presentation. Because I was just asked, let me tell you that all the presentations will be available for everybody to have a clearer insight, and also because, sorry, Emanuela, I rushed you on this last one. So thank you all speakers for this first panel and for these insightful contributions. It's clear that islands communities need stronger and more targeted policies, and I will shift now the discussion to the next panel, the European institutions' responses, where we will hear how policymakers are addressing these challenges and what concrete support islands can expect. Thank you. Mr. 𝐀𝐠𝐞𝐧𝐝𝐚, I think I want to give the floor to you.
Thank you very much. Good morning to all. I think the discussion has started with these excellent presentations and further presentations. I think we have set the first level of the scene that we are now ready to discuss on a more institutional way. Thanks a lot, of course, to INSULEUR and all the members for including us today, and of course the presence of the Deputy Minister from Greece, and also giving me the role to moderate such an interesting session. Of course, it's the momentum, the political and programmatic momentum that creates a new level and a new era of discussions that let's hope that it's not just discussions. So, since we know each other very, very well, and we will try to keep the time as set in the agenda, I will pass the floor to the speakers, giving them at maximum 10 minutes. I think we can include all our main remarks in 10 minutes, so we can have time for some conclusions, because we have some very, very clear milestones. Some of them are already mentioned, but we have some political milestones within the next period that is very critical for our dialogue, that it's not just a recent dialogue, but it's one of the fundamentals from the European perspective of the cohesion policy, but not only of the cohesion policy, but in terms of solidarity and the operation of the market. So I will pass the floor first to Mr. Ioannis Vardakastanis, the President of the Economic Section of EEC. Sorry for the small change, but I think we need to give the floor first to Mr. Vardakastanis, and thank him also for his support for all these years on insular aspects, but also for his tremendous social offer, on his presence and his experience also both on European but also national level. Thank you, Mr. Vardakastanis, and please, you have the floor for maximum 10 minutes for your insights.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary of State, and I thank you very much for accommodating my need to speak first, because I need to run very fast to the airport. My flight is at 20 minutes to 2 Brussels time, just to understand. So the environmental and climate issues that we are discussing in today's workshop are vitally important. This week, we have witnessed the consequences of the climate crisis in the Greek islands of Paros and Mykonos. There are a lot of things to be done to prevent these phenomena instead of trying to heal the wounds after the disasters. It is the view of the European Economic and Social Committee that the EU needs a new funding mechanism that can offer immediate and ambitious assistance to help member states in emergencies such as natural disasters. The ESC has therefore already proposed setting up a new climate adjustment fund. This funding should be redirected from existing EU funds, notably the Cohesion Fund and the Recovery and Resilience Facility, RRF, and managed in a streamlined and coherent way through the new fund. Moreover, efforts to overcome environmental issues should focus on tackling energy insecurity, thus reducing the vulnerabilities of these regions, while at the same time providing support so that they can meet the objectives of the green transition and achieve decarbonization goals. The priorities should be preserving and/or restoring the biodiversity and the fragile ecosystems of the regions, and providing support to secure just transition to climate neutrality. In this context, sustainable management of natural resources such as land, water, raw materials in these areas, and promoting circular economy solutions are very essential. The ESC believes that sustainable capacity building is a cross-cutting issue for all EU islands in all the above sets of issues that have been discussed. Sustainable capacity building could deliver on collective goals of meeting the challenges facing by EU islands, allowing for place-based approaches and solutions to respond to the different, albeit interconnected dimensions of these challenges. In our most recent opinion on EU islands in 2023, we emphasized the vital importance of committing all actors at both EU and national levels to helping EU islands, mountain areas, and sparsely populated areas and outermost regions to meet the challenges they face. This commitment could take the form of a pact, for instance, an islands pact, along the lines as the urban pact or the rural pact, in which an EU strategy for each of these types of regions could be developed, taking into account the specific needs of each type of region. We are happy and proud that our efforts and persistence to this end have resulted in good news. On Tuesday, the European Commission published a communication entitled a Reform Agenda for Cohesion Policy, the Midterm Review 2025. In this communication, the Commission announced that the consultation will be launched on the development of a strategy for islands. Probably the representative of the Commission could give us more information and more insight and to share it with us regarding the time frame of this consultation and what the strategy will include. Once again, I would like to thank you for being in our premises. They will be always at your disposal. Our collaboration always gives more strength to the work you do, and we support for the island regions of the European Union. A commitment also, as I said at the beginning, that comes from me, myself, as an islander from Zakynthos, Greece. And I leave you now, thanking you again, to go to another beautiful island, Rhodos. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And I think through your presentation, you mentioned and you gave us all the main milestones and all those remarks that we will include in the conclusions. And I think it offers a great push for the next speaker that I will give now the floor and thank her for her presence. But at the end of the day, is our home. The Directorate General for Regional and Urban Policy is always the place that we would like to see as our home. So we have a representative from the Commission, Ms. Gergana Miladinova, and thanks her a lot for her contribution. We know that cohesion policy and the experts and the officials of DG Regio is always on our part. And it's quite critical to listen in such an important day for the new president of INSULEUR, but also with all these announcements that creates a positive, I would say, way that we're thinking of the future, and we're expecting to listen from you, Ms. Miladinova, for the next steps. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and congratulations, Mr. Roussos, for your appointment. So I have a privilege to speak towards the end, and many things were already said. I also know that I shouldn't try to convince you about the importance of islands, so I will not spend time on saying how important are islands. We had a lot of, we heard a lot already about the climate change, geopolitics, biodiversity. I had the right to stay and no one left behind, which was also mentioned. It was even mentioned that islands are a very diverse group, which has been a challenge for us. So we really are interested in hearing also from you, how do you think this very specific but diverse group should be addressed? I will just remind what we have currently. So I would stop quickly very quickly on 3 points. So first, the cohesion policy. Indeed, cohesion policy has been one of the key policies helping EU regions, including islands. We started focusing even more on the territorial aspects and the areas which are specifically challenged from either natural or demographic challenges. So in this 21-27 period, we have a new Article 10 on support for disadvantaged areas. We introduced a new policy objectives, which is not on thematic, so not innovation, for example, green and so on. We have territorial policy objective, which is a move also towards integrated territorial solutions for different territories. I think we are achieving quite good results already in the current period. We even saw the presentation from the professor from Canary Islands that was supported by Interreg Europe, which is also from cohesion policy. So there is a lot of support going towards islands. We have difficulties with territorial codes, but we did a more detailed look of the allocations that are going, the funding that are going to islands. And I can say that at least 19.3 billion from cohesion policy are going in this period to islands in 11 member states. But of course, we need more, and I want to say also that the midterm review communication of 2 days ago was mentioned. We need to make sure that the money are used, and we need to make sure that there is reprogramming as much as possible towards the of the unused money towards the challenges of today. and there are a lot related to islands as well. So, for example, water scarcity was mentioned, housing, energy connectivity, so all these things that you know. But please pay attention also of the possibilities to redirect funds, because this communication is also about cohesion policy being modern policy and being able to adapt to the modern realities. So this would be an important test for all of us as well. So the second, we don't promote that much our work on harnessing talent. So in Regio, we also launched a platform, a communication, and then a platform with a lot of support. And I was hearing about the challenges related to training people, for example, and so on. And this is a place, so harnessing talent platform, where I would advise you to go and have a look for different support tools. It is for regions that are facing demographic challenges. I know that many of the islands are also facing demographic challenges. So if you think you might be in this group, you should go and see. And then there is the third thing that we currently do is the territorial agenda for 2030. And I say we, which is wrong, because it is intergovernmental process where member states are discussing territorial issues, including islands. So having said this, we have heard all your calls throughout the years. We prepared a lot of briefings to our hierarchy as well on islands, and this has been very positive. I mean, you are a very loud group. As it was very well noticed by all of you, there is this mentioning of the launch of public consultation on the development of the strategy for islands in the communication of 2 days ago. So we are starting to work on this important topic as well. I cannot give more details about the timing, unfortunately, also of the launch of consultation, but I can say that consultation is a very broad topic, and in fact it was me who asked Irene for the slides, because I already see some interesting points. It may take time, but I think the most important is that there was this announcement, and I think we still need to analyze the needs of the islands maybe a bit better. So your input is very important. We are doing our exercise homework as well, and I'm sure that we will meet in the future as well. So thank you about all these interesting ideas already, and yeah, I'm listening.
Thank you so much. Also using less of your available time. And we all know that the Regio and the officers from Regio are always very accurate, but at the same time very open to listening to things. Of course, we the islanders, we are very famous for becoming loud but not noisy. So for sure, it's on our place now and our levels to create a more structural dialogue from our side, so the contribution of the islands ecosystem, the institutional islands ecosystem, should be more solid and more specific in your call. And thank you so much for your contribution. I think I will make some notice at the end in the conclusions that could be a step for the next steps, also for INSULEUR, but also CPMR, the Island Commission, and us, I mean the member states, which is very important. I would like now to pass the floor to Ms. Céline Ollier, if I said it correctly, the head of task for climate change adaptation of the European Court of Auditors, which is actually it's an honor for us to have you here, and also to listen very carefully on what the European Court of Auditors has to say. And I know that your work is based on tangible and very real data coming from the field on the implementation of this kind of funding. So it's important on how the institutions, the regions, the governments are actually using those funds, and the lessons learned that from your side. So thank you so much. Please, you have the floor.
I've prepared a presentation
Sorry, thank you. I will present briefly myself. So I'm Céline Ollier. I'm working in the European Court of Auditors, which is based in Luxembourg, and the European Court of Auditors is the external auditors of the Commission. And last year we conducted an audit, a performance audit on climate adaptation in the EU, and this report was published in October 24. You can reach on our website with the title Action Not Keeping Up with Ambition. So this audit targeted especially 4 member states, Poland, Estonia, Austria, and France, but we did not have a specific consideration for islands, just indirectly, but nevertheless we tackled the biggest risks, which are the coastal erosion, water scarcities, and flooding. And now I'm conducting another performance audit on POSEI, which is a EU support for the outermost region. Thank you. For the outermost regions. And we have been in the Canary Islands, also in Martinique, Guyane, and Guadeloupe. And I will try to make a link with what I say from this report with what we have seen also on the ground. So I will structure my presentation with 4 main points. Why did we do this audit? What did we look at? And what did we find? This will be the more concrete part. And also, what do we recommend? Mainly to the Commission. So why did we do this audit? I think it was said several times that the frequency and severity of extreme climate events is increasing, and especially also in the island. I'm thinking the outermost region of France. Mrs. Elie was talking about Mayotte with a storm Chido, but also La Réunion, and La Réunion had another storm last year, Béval. And when we were in Martinique, they are also facing some drought, repetitive droughts. So really the islands are facing, this climate change. And what we have, there is a study which says that for the economy, there will be some economic losses from extreme climate event. They will be increasing, of course. And it will increase up to, according to these studies, up to 175 billion euro a year if we are with a scenario of +3 degrees. And of course, if you try to adapt, you will save a lot of money. And we decided to have a look to climate adaptation because there was already quite a lot of EU funds flagged as adaptation, particularly for the cohesion policy. So what did we look at? So first we analyzed whether the EU and the national framework and plans, they provided sound framework for climate adaptation. And also we looked at if they were reported on properly. Also we assessed also the awareness of the strategy plans and the EU tools at local level. And so we tried to start at the EU adaptation strategy and the EU climate law. And then we went down to some national adaptation strategies, regional adaptation strategy, and then finally to the EU fundings. And we tried to identify in the EU funds for flagged as climate adaptation if they were really relevant and if they really contributed to the climate adaptation. This is so it's again only for 4 member states we had a specific look at. So overall, so what did we find? So overall, when you are going at the EU adaptation strategy, which has 4 pillars, it's we found it quite sound. There is a sound EU adaptation framework. And even I had a look, there is some 1 or 2 sentences dedicated to the islands that they are they are particularly vulnerable to climate change, and the Commission will also want to foster the exchange of best practice and solution. And then we went down we had a look to these 4 member states, their national adaptation plan and strategy. So overall, we found it was coherent with the EU adaptation strategies. But when we went down at regional level or a sectorial level, because sometimes there is some sectorial adaptation plan, here there was some conflicting priorities. There was like opposing needs for increased irrigation versus the will to reduce the water consumption. And also, we found that normally when you are drafting or when you have a national adaptation plan, you should know where to go. If you have a scenario of +4 degrees, +2 degrees, etc. And France and Austria, they have this +4 degrees, whereas some other member states like Poland, it was really not clear if they were still using old provision. Also, the reporting, the member states, they have to report on their progress for adaptation. We found that the reporting system was very descriptive, qualitative, not possible to compare with it, with no common basic indicators. I think it was mentioned previously. And of course, it is difficult to assess the progress made by the member state. And also, we launched a survey to 400 municipalities in these 400 municipalities in these 4 member states. This was statistically the results were statistically representative at national level, and what we found is that most of the municipalities we surveyed, they were not very aware about the EU adaptation strategy, neither about the national adaptation plan, and also we were using during this audit different tools, Climate Adapt, Copernicus, which are very powerful tools and very useful. And we found out that all these municipalities, they were not aware about it and they did not use it. And here we think that there is an effort to promote more these tools. And also, we found the differences between cities and rural municipalities, where cities were better prepared than the small municipalities. Here, the result was like majority of the city, they have a local adaptation plan, whereas the small municipalities in rural area, they do not have the means, etc. Yes, we had some challenge in tracking EU funds. I will briefly because climate adaptation is really transversal. So, of course, the biggest pot comes from the cohesion and the regional development, where for the period 2014-20, it was 7 billion flagged as adaptation, and for the current one, this is 13 billion. This is a big increase, but still not enough, perhaps. Also, you have agriculture, but agriculture, I cannot give you any figures because there is climate action and they do not distinguish mitigation from adaptation. But yeah, and you have also research and innovation. So there is this EU mission specific on adaptation. This is around €1 billion, and you have also LIFE, which has some dedicated project on adaptation. And also, Recovery and Resilience Fund, it's around €12 billion. So, now at the project level. So we analyzed 36 projects really flagged as adaptation projects into 5 different areas, but I will focus only on the flooding, water scarcities, and forest management and coastal erosion. And what the overall message we have is that there was a preference for short-term solution rather long-term solution. But the overall message also is out of these 36 projects we have audited, 19 were in line. They were really increasing the adaptive capacities. 13, they did not. And 2, we found 2 cases of maladaptation. And for 2, we couldn't assess. And here, regarding flooding, we had a very positive and nice project about renaturation of river in France and Poland. And even in France and Austria, and even in Austria, they were removing the concrete, which was of the bed river, to give more space, to give more space to the river. But also what we found, and I think this might be a very important insight for the island, because the island, they have a lot of land pressure. There was sometimes a conflicting objective between construction, so you need to have a permit for that, so land planning and climate adaptation. And here in the picture, what you can see, it was a kind of protection, flood protection against a new quarter. It was in Austria, but this new quarter was built in an area really prone to flooding. And furthermore, they did not use to evaluate the size of this protection. They only used historical data without considering the future climate condition. And yes, we know that in the future, at least in Austria, it will rain much more, and in a shorter, you will have also shorter period of heavy rain. Regarding coastal erosion, again here, more short-term, long-term solutions are needed rather than short-term. We assessed very positively all these nature-based solutions to address coastal erosion. Well, here in Europe, this is more about the dune. We had a very nice dune restoration, but it does not stop the coastal erosion. It just breaks the coastal erosion. And on the other side, we found some construction of dike or maintenance, which was really not increase the adaptive capacities. Also, and very costly, and even for the EU budget, every year there is this sand beach refilling, that the beach is losing a lot of sand, and every year you have to put again the sand for the tourists, which is quite it's costly. And yes, and we were talking about, yes, transformative action, which also would need a relocation, and this is, at least in France, it will become a very heavy discussion. And then water scarcity. Water scarcity, what we found is that the biggest focus for agriculture in water scarcity is irrigation, the solution. I don't want to say that I'm against irrigation, but this should not be the only solution. You need to go to have a bit more long-term solution, meaning try to use adapted crop, more adapted crop to the new condition, to switch from winter crop to winter crop, summer crop, and also to try to have agricultural practices keeping the soil moisture. And we found again some cases where there was a construction of reservoir for irrigation, which was based on historical data. And we know that in the future, there will be, in this region, there will be less rain, and perhaps this reservoir is oversized. And we found a case of maladaptation, that new irrigated area in an already stressed regions for a water-intensive crop, like it was kiwi. And about the last point, it's about forestation. We all know that in EU, and okay, I know a bit less in the island, but the forest is really not in the good shape and need to diversify. This is one of the solutions. So we found very nice projects where after an attack of a bark beetle, it was in Austria, they reforested with mixed species, or also to make the forest more resilient against water scarcity or against drought. There was they were building some retention ponds in forest, but in the same time also we found projects which replanted exactly one species, monoculture, the same species which was destroyed by a storm, and it was not really an increased adaptive capacities. So after having said all that, what do we recommend to the Commission? It was a DG CLIMA, our ODT. What do we recommend is first to improve the reporting on climate adaptation, to better develop and promote the EU tools for climate adaptation, because they are really good, and promote also the knowledge sharing, and ensure that all relevant EU-funded projects are adapted to the current, but also to the future climate condition. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Olier, for your contribution. I think with the three speeches we had an insight. I think from the last one, and please allow me to start a little bit on the opposite, it's very clear, and I can assure you that the same results, you can find them also in the islands, but maybe in a more intensive scale. And this is actually the issue that we face in the islands, that those effects and those disasters, the natural disasters, unfortunately we're very experienced now in that, also in the islands, they create such an additional effort, and unfortunately we are using part of the cohesion funds that are dedicated for other things to tackle this climate change. So it's a dialogue on a European level, how we use the fundamental funding for things that we have to face on a more short term. And this is part of the quality of the funding. And if I can merge a little bit some notes on your contribution from Regio, is exactly, the funding is already available. It's the way that the member states are using that. So in case, and actually this is the mid-term review purpose, to showcase and maybe point out a little bit the way that we should work within the member states and with the funds already allocated, and of course use it as an example for the future. How we can redesign programs, redesign policies, so they can adapt also their intervention not after the disaster but before. So it's quite critical, and if I can sum up a little bit and use the next minutes that we have available, and I will try to connect it with your presentation before about the sensitivity, the region of Sardinia that is very active, actually the region of Sardinia also on a European level. We had a great meeting the last period also here in Brussels again with Sardinia and the representation here. It's exactly how environmental planning, how island proofing for environment and for resilience is working or not. And actually this is the question, this is the way that we make it loud but not noisy, is the island proofing of those critical policies for the islands, that we are all convinced that all these affects the economy of the islands. And if the economy is affected, it means that we will have all the issues related to social and economic cohesion. And since we are under insular umbrella, let me say that we are here to face also the role of SMEs and those backbone, that backbone of the local economies that is based on SMEs. And the island SMEs and the islanders, they face completely different challenges than their colleagues in the cities or in the continental part and maybe in the heart of Europe. And just to sum up, I think Mr. Ioannis Vardakastanis is always pointing out the examples, the recent examples. We, from Greece, we faced, maybe you well known, in Santorini, the fear of other disasters. So before something was coming, but also in Mykonos and Paros, we are living with the changes already. And we can calculate the amount of money to tackle critical responses to basic infrastructure that even if you construct it in different way, the nature is so devastating in the way that is interfering when it expresses strength that we cannot face it. So there will be always a need for adaptation, but of course for tackling. Also, Mr. Vardakastanis reminded us for the proposal of the committee for a systemic restructuring of the funding. She mentioned the energy investments and energy democracy, which is very critical. Of course, the green transition and preserving the fragile ecosystems. He pointed out also, like the other speakers, about the sustainability, the need of capacity building, which is very critical for all of us. The place-based approach and solutions, and of course, as we mentioned before, and all the speakers mentioned, we are listening to capacity building for us, but also for our discussants. It's very important. We in Greece, for example, we are running this kind of capacity building is protected, and it's a privilege that we created under the provisions of the National Act, but we need to create an academy of the cohesion policy. We need skilled representatives. The issues are not, to be generalistic. You need to be very specific in your discussion, so we can come in this dialogue with DG Regio, of course. We need to be prepared. To be prepared not to stay around our cell, but be ready to discuss in a partnership and discuss how we can be reflected in the cohesion policy, but not only, in the fundamental principles of the European Union. Mrs. Miladinova made, I think, the perfect presentation of the milestones coming. It's not from our side just to ask for things, but ask from ourselves. It's something that I'm repeating because we know that very well. In Greece, we are working very, very, very closely with our partners, and partnership can create common values. We need to start from our home and then discuss with the others. We've started doing that. Of course, your presentation was very indicative, and there's already an allocation of money that is very specific for the islands. We have to discuss about the quality of the allocation, the eligibility. So all these issues that came now with the announcement of the consultation of mid-term review, but what does it mean for us? It's a discussion that we need to do. There is still time to interfere and make changes in the running programming period, so we can use it as an example for the next programming period, which is very, very, very critical. Of course, we listen with, as we discussed, about the territorial agenda that is still active and is actually part of the Lisbon Treaty and all the common provisions. We should work on that, and insularity, as you said, is already included as part of this territorial approach. And probably the island proofing of those critical policies maybe should be more and better elaborated within that. And of course, the promise of an EU strategy is a very good starting point, as you said also, and is all for us also. And I think with Mrs. Ollier, we had a very specific evaluation. I'm quite sure that we have a lot of things to discuss about construction vs climate adaptation, which is very critical sometimes. You mentioned that. And land use is something very, very specific for the islands. And the lack of space for further development creates also this scarcity of space. So it was very, very interesting. Allow me to close now, keeping the time. I think we had an excellent event, Mr. Asonitis. We are very glad to have all the insular chambers here, but resilience and adaptation of economies, societies and policies is relying on local island economies that rely on SMEs, prosperity and sustainability. And SMEs in islands face multiple and additional difficulties that start from geography to structural characteristics of local markets. And of course, let's not forget that we are all in a new era, a new geopolitical status. Let's keep that in mind. We have a new political framework. We have an agenda set by von der Leyen. We have the letters to the commissioners, but we now have also the first steps of those letters. This is very critical for all of us. We have a new programming operating response that we need to give under the midterm review of cohesion policy. And of course, if I may conclude with that, the Draghi report and any kind of strategic documents emphasize on maintaining European economy on a competitive status. We have to make sure that this competitiveness of European market makes sense also of our smaller economies, the island economies. And of course, climate change creates short and long-term challenges for our fragile island economies. We need to make sure that we're prepared to tackle this particular vulnerability of the islands. And yes, there's a lot of space of discussion, there's a lot of space of partnership, and I strongly believe that as the past and the history of Insulaire, but also the future of Insulaire, in the leading hands of Ioannis Roussos, but the great new board, will be part of this alliance that we need to create, doing work, investing in knowledge, and not just asking for money. We need to create the island's knowledge. We need to ensure and propose island proofing in critical policies. And as the Deputy Minister said, we are here to discuss on a European level not asking but discussing how cohesion affects or not the islands and any other territorial part. Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Asonitis. I think you will close the event.
No, I will not. I give the floor to our minister, who is there. I mean,
first of all, very much for this very fruitful and constructive meeting today. I think all agree that insularity is going to be the talk of the town for the next months and years to come. Our islands are an integral part of our societies, of our continent, and we have to pay attention to the needs of the islands, of all European islands. And since we have this common goal for cohesion, we have to work more and more in order to ameliorate all the, I should say, bad things. So with these words, I thank you very much all. It was an honor for me to address your body, and of course once again I'd like to extend my warmest wishes to John for a constructive term. Thank you very much all.
thank you, Minister. Thank you very much. May I ask to have a photo with the Minister, at least the Council, the new Board of Directors of Insular, and you are all invited to a light lunch outside. Thank you very much for your attention and participation also. Thank you. Thank you also to our interpreters, and a special thank to, I mean, the Secretariat of EEC. Thank you.